go. Hello and welcome to the Outcast. I'm your host HC, and with me is.
Wolf.
And today we are talking about a topic that honestly we've kind of covered before, considering what this podcast is. We've probably had discussions about this, but I
This
figured, you know
is
what?
this is a topic that is spread out through multiple videos, but hey, let's make it one video that you have to watch now to get this topic.
And also, I think there's probably some value in talking about the entire topic in particular regarding if we're talking about a specific thing. So, why not give it a shot? Let's try it out. We're going to talk about
Hmm.
adaptations. And when we say adaptations, we're just going to talk about what do we think is a good adaptation, what
I
we
just,
think is a bad adaptation, what's in the middle, what's when are people wrong when they say this isn't like the book? Because sometimes you need to figure out the source material is a bit shit. I'm looking at you, Order of the Phoenix, but that's besides the point.
I just realized something, and I want to
Yeah.
point this out to all our viewers and to you as well. I'm gonna send you
Hmm.
this. Uh,
What is this?
our image for the background looks like it's the Outcast versus Adaptations.
I mean, yeah, the Outcast V's versus adaptations. Yeah, that's well,
Makes sense. It's perfect.
depends on what adaptations we're talking about. There will be verses in here, so we shall see. But you know what? We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go over what even is an adaptation. Well, according to Google, because we need the most, how do I say, the most, the most non biased thing
Hmm.
we can think of. That there is actually no definition for adaptation, so we need to go to the next best thing, to Wikipedia. Can you tell I'm improvising this because I am? But basically, it's in the name for all intents and purposes. This is in the name of what we're talking about. It's adapting something from one thing to the other.
Yeah.
As it says here, an adaptation is a transfer of a work of art from one style, culture, or medium to another. Some examples are film adaptation, a story from another work adapted into a film, literary adaptation, a story from a literary course adapted into another work, and a theatrical adaptation, which is adapted into a play. There are also video game adaptations and TV show adaptations. There are many.
Yes.
Now, for the sake of this podcast, I think there are like four different kinds of adaptations. One is basically the in name only type of adaptation, where there's zero connection to the source material. Then there are ones where they change a lot to the point that it's basically its own thing, but it still has some elements and plot details and even the heart of the original. Like, I think How to Train Your Dragon fits into that one because it's very different from the books, but it keeps character names, some characteristics of those characters, and the general idea ish, and it sticks true to the message of the book of the source material according to the author. So that's where How to Train Your Dragon falls.
Yeah.
Then and then there are the adaptations which they are overall following the same type of plot points and events from the source material, but there are some changes. Like, I think Harry Potter falls into that category, and I would argue the second Sonic movie also kind of falls in there somewhere. Afterwards we have, and I think afterwards we kind of have the, as close to by the book as you can be. Like, it's a direct adaptation. The If it changes something, it adds to it because it's a movie and you need to add some stuff.
Yeah.
Hunger Games and The Last of Us TV show kind of fall under that
Yes, I think The Last of Us TV show, it's an adaptation that strengthens the original, right? It's an adaptation that you can watch and you say, "Okay, I come away with this I come away from this with more than what I might have gotten from the original because they were able to add things that strengthened that original story."
Yeah, but at the same
Last of Us
time,
is a great
what
example
I
of
mean,
that.
yeah, but what I mean with that is also that the with The Last of Us, the thing is that they add a lot that's not in the game. Like
Yeah.
we thought, go to our episode of it, but you have the entire third episode. You took a character that was basically just there for a bit, and a character that's just mentioned, and you gave them probably one of the most heartfelt stories that was seen on television last year.
Yes.
So, so so in this case, now there. While I say that it's accurate, there are some differences with The Last of Us that aren't like just additions. Like I know that the two brothers, the Joel and Ellie meet, and the kid in originally is not deaf, but he was made deaf in the show. But
Mhm.
that's really minor. Like
Generally speaking,
he doesn't necessarily make the story any different.
yeah, but generally speaking, I would say like those particular types of adaptations, the things they do add or the things they do change tend to make the story stronger.
Yeah, and then I did mention the Hunger Games, and in this case, and like, yeah, it makes more sense because in the book, the entire book is told from the main character's point of view, from Katniss's point of view. So in the movie, they add scenes of like that's not her point of view. You see stuff that she couldn't see.
Are those
Either.
strong movies?
Here's the thing: I'm not necessarily saying that it's good. And for the record, I don't mind the Hunger Games, but
They
it's
are
flawed.
fine.
The,
They are
like
fine.
they're flawed.
That's the best I can
And
say.
considering additions, I will say that the first movie actually added something to the book. A lot of headache because who the fuck made the cinematography? But that's a whole other story. So, but I do mention that in terms of adapting, Hunger Games doesn't stray away from the source material. Like you don't get any differences. You don't get that much deviation from it. Again, maybe there's a one part that's cut here or one detail that's missing there, but the story is the same story.
Fair. I agree.
So
I
we
think.
talked about
Oh no, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that these are like the type, in terms of to give examples to other stuff. So we mentioned How to Train Your Dragon in it's basically its own thing, but it does it because there are dragons. They are training them, but in the book they are training the in the books. The difference is that the way in which they train them, and in the movies, it's going from killing them to training them.
Well, it's
So,
also like
so
they can talk. Like there's differences, but like you said, it's an adaptation that gets the heart of the media right.
mhm.
Right. Like
Yes.
I think many people you talk to in How to Train Your Dragon say that at least the first movie and the books feel very similar, even though they are very different. They feel similar because they try to capture those same feelings and those same ideas.
And again, you have you have the main character is named Hiccup. He has a dragon named Toothless. Toothless is entirely different, but that's besides the
Yes,
point. And there are some other recurring themes. And again, there's like even in the sequels, there are like some things that that came and were introduced from the later
from the book.
sequels,
Yeah, from the books and
and
everything. Yeah.
the endings do they kind of have parallel endings in terms of explaining why there are no more dragons around.
Again,
So
similar vibes, similar feelings, similar ideals and stories and lessons it wants to teach you, but it does do it differently for the most part.
mhm. Yeah,
The
and
other type of adaptation you talked about was something that is nothing like its original story, right? And
Godzilla 1998 is everything you need to know.
well,
But
another example of that though, like I, I I think it'd be good to like, hey, an example that's really amazing of what it
mhm,
did with its source material is Arcane, right? Everyone loves
yeah,
Arcane.
the thing
Nothing like the games.
I was gonna bring this up because I don't really have much experience with League of Legends, and maybe we talked about this when we covered Arcane, but from what I've heard, it's not necessarily that it's adapting anything. It's that it's just it takes place in this world, but otherwise there's no connection.
It's adapting some stuff, right? Because there are some things there that do happen within not necessarily the game, but within the lore, quote unquote, of the game, right? That is happening in the show. But for the most part, what you're seeing is nothing like the games whatsoever, right?
But at the same time, would you say it's like the Fallout show, which you told me it's basically in the canon, just another story in there?
I would say for Arcane, I would not
Mhm.
say it's another story because it is telling you a story that has already happened within, again, the lore. Not necessarily happened within the game, but within the lore of League of Legends. If you care about that, from what I understand, I could be wrong. League fans will yell at me, I assure you, if I am.
I I don't have a horse in the race. I don't know.
But
This is
from
not.
what I know and understand, yes, it is adapting, but if you choose not to call that an adaptation, I would say also that is completely fair, right? Fallout is, like you said, like since you brought it up, is not something I would necessarily consider an adaptation because it is telling a different story. It's not
Yeah.
retelling the story of a game. Even though you can pick out similarities and you can pick out, like, oh, here's these references, here's these similarities, it's not adapting anything.
And to be honest, if we're
It's
talking
not
about
adapting a story, right? I should be clear. It's not adapting a story. It might be adapting the games to, a shown media like television or a movie, but it's not adapting a story that happened within the games and bringing it to that. And I think that's like a very specific distinction worth making because you can have an adaptation that just brings something from one media to another, but you can get into the weeds arguing about this all day long, I'm sure, but I would not consider those adaptations personally because they're
and
not adapting a
also
story.
and on that note, I would even say to some degree, a lot of Disney movies are this type of adaptation where
Mm,
they take the
especially,
original
yeah.
story, like let me think about something. Fox and the Hound. I can assure you, there's only one thing in the original Fox and the Hound book that's like the movie.
Isn't like Lion King based off of like the White Lion or something like that? I forget the name of the
Oh no, no.
story.
Well, here's the thing. Lion King, according to Disney, was based around Hamlet.
Ah,
Uh,
yes,
but
yeah,
yeah, but no, but like the Kimber the White Lion comparison,
yes,
like
that was the
I
name.
don't want to say it's an adaptation, much more like it's an it's a ripoff that may have been an accident, but let's not kid ourselves.
It was we can say inspired by to give Disney some credit that they
I don't
don't
know,
probably deserve.
because let's say when they were confronted about it, they were like, "No, we don't. We never heard of this Kimba thing until after we finished Lion King. What are you talking about? No, 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 no." But then again, there was also like Matthew Broderick actually said in an interview that when he was approached to play Simba, he was sure that that the person from Disney said Kimba. He
Doing
didn't
great,
realize
Disney.
until oh my god. But let's say I will say though, if we are going to this could be an entire outcast on its own. Let's be
Mm.
honest. But for the record, to be honest, Kimba and The Lion King are two different types of stories
Yeah,
because not to say they're both kind of coming of age of this lion cub who grows to be the king of the animals, right? This is there, yeah, but they have different teams, they have different way of doing this, and there are some similarities. Like let's say you can tell me that Lion King didn't take the cloud scene from Kimba the White Lion. Like it's there. You can't tell me that it's not. But if you look at some other stories that were told with Kimba the White Lion, there are it's not the same, not by a
yeah.
long shot. And though, but again, this is like a whole other debate that we can get into. But the Lion King is not an adaptation of Kimba, is the point.
Mhm.
Actually, the only reason that Toy, I think I think Mushi Productions, I think that's it. The animations, the company who made Kimba, actually said that the reason they never took this entire thing to court is because they saw it as a compliment. So make of it as you will.
Fair enough.
And now, in terms of the only one we didn't give any example for, I guess, is the, you know, it follows the main story beats, but but there are also some major changes. Again, Harry Potter. Do I even need to say anything else?
Fair. Like I could list many, many different anime that kind of do this. Um, because you have to sometimes do that, right? For run times and things of that
Sometimes
nature.
around times, or sometimes sometimes it also makes sense for the story,
Yeah,
right?
like some,
Like
like
I would argue that again, to bring up Harry Potter again, as much as people say the movies does and don't follow the books directly, there are some changes which and additions which I think actually make the movies better to
mhm,
some degree.
yeah. Well, I
Like
mean, that's always
some
gonna have to be a
scenes,
thing you have to
not
do, right?
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
And like like honestly, it took some years for me to let it be for it to grow on me. But I actually prefer Harry breaking the Elder Wand in pieces rather than just leaving it next to Dumbledore's grave like he does in the book.
Mm,
I think it works better for as a conclusion, personally.
yeah. You always, and even then, right? You still want to do stuff like that because there are some things that may not work, that work symbolically very well in a book that don't work very well symbolically in a movie or a show, right?
That's very true.
And
Yes.
like, and this isn't just have to be like symbolically. This can be in literary devices and things of that nature, right? Like things that work in books don't necessarily work in movies or shows, and things that work in movies and shows don't necessarily work in books. So
Yeah.
you always have to be, or they just don't adapt well, or they conflate run times, and it's like, does this small side story have a ton to do with the main story, right? Can we cut this and the main story still be fine? And
And
ultimately,
this is
that's
kind
a hard
of.
balancing act. It takes some skill and talent to figure that out, and it takes an understanding of the source material as well to figure that out too.
That's true, and this is kind of bringing up a topic I wanted to bring up. Is straying too far from the source material a bad thing? And I say not all the time, because I can assure you, uh, Miles Morales' origin story didn't happen at the same time as the Spider-Verse story arc, and yet we have two of the best animated movies ever made thanks to that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think in straying too far from the source material is a bad thing. The question is, what are you changing, and what is your approach to
Well,
it?
I mean, another example, right? The Follow show recently,
Mhm.
it changed quite a bit, and I know some people got upset about that, but I sit back and I say personally, I'm fine with those changes because I like what those changes mean for the story they're telling. And ultimately, those changes don't change anything for me personally for the story of Fallout or the canon or the lore of Fallout. And that's another thing, right? I think you can't hold. I think a lot of people have an issue of they hold lore to be way too
Like the
important
lore
for
and
what it
canon seem
is.
to be, yeah, this thing where it has to be
They give it too
followed
much
100%.
reverence.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, that's perfectly fine. We had this kind of discuss. I talked about it when we talked about Sonic Prime, when suddenly this show is announced to be canonical to the main games, and people got pretty up in arms about that because there are some inconsistencies with it. And especially now, in the months since the show ended, the main writer for the games was like, yeah, when I was brought as a consultant, tried to flag some of the continuity errors, and the show crew ignored me. So so the thing is, though, it's also kind of important to point out what kind of an adaptation are we doing here? Because if it's an adaptation or something, I can be like, okay, that's different. But if it's an adaptation that's supposed to be like Sonic Prime or Fallout, that it's part of the bigger universe's continuity, I think there it holds a bit more
Well, you
leverage.
also have to ask the question too: who are you doing this for as well, right?
That's also
Because
true.
it's a very different decision making process, and even the thing you're creating will turn out very differently if you're making it for fans or if you're making it for your average viewer, right? If you're trying to bring in new people who aren't familiar with this thing, there are changes you're going to have to make that fans may not be happy with. That does that make those changes bad? No, not necessarily, but it does mean that like you're going to alienate some of your fan base, you're going to make some of them angry, but I think it really depends on how you communicate that too, right? You have to be clear in communicating like, hey, this may not be for you. We're doing something different here. You know, you may like it, you may not. Like they're never gonna unfortunately, I don't think anyone's ever gonna say that because that might hurt them somewhat. But
Yeah,
I think it is something that you do have to consider in your decision making process and when you are creating an adaptation because you have to decide like who do we want to make this adaptation for. It sometimes can be hard to square the fan base with your average viewer and trying to bring in new people. And you do have to
yeah,
sacrifice something somewhere sometimes.
but then again, there's also like the kind of the hypocritical side of it
Mm,
because let's talk about the franchise that, to an extent, kind of brought up the idea. You gave me the idea to do this episode. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
mm.
If you ask a lot of people who are turtle fans these days, they would tell when they refer to the original, they refer to the '80s cartoon.
Yeah.
But turtle fans are also should know the '80s cartoon is not the source material.
Nope.
That goes to the 1984 comic. And if you want us to talk about the differences, we'll be here all fucking day. But so let's say Peter Laird, one of the co-creators of the Ninja Turtles, doesn't really like the '80s show.
But something else also that we could kind of that you can kind of get in the weeds too on as well, adapting something that is old for a newer generation too, for a younger
Yeah,
generation as well. Like
we'll
that
get there.
also changes a lot.
Of course, and we'll get there, but I just want to say, in terms of what is a strain too far, yeah. So in a way,
Mm-hmm.
on the on the surface, I could tell you, hey, the '80s Ninja Turtles cartoon isn't a good adaptation of the comic because it's like, okay, they have the four turtles, they have but the comic is really dark and gritty, and the show is very lighthearted and cheerful and funny and not serious at all. And also it's self-aware, but it's not the comic that it was
Yeah.
based on, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But then you have something like when the latest TMNT movie came out, Mutant Mayhem, people were annoyed that it's not like the original show, and I'm like, you guys are aware that this is a franchise that's been around for 40 years and has changed a lot in a lot of adaptations. And like the people and get this, people, why people were angry, some people are angry about this movie. You'll never guess the reason.
Does it have to do with Mikey? He
No,
didn't say
it's be-
cowabunga enough.
no, it's because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles acted like teenagers.
Wild.
Mm-hmm.
Wild. I mean, to
No,
be fair, you suck, teens. You're awful. God, I hate you. But you're mean and
no, that's
horrible. No.
like that's the actual thing because the turtles were actually voiced by teenagers and they apparently like improvised like 80% of their lines. So people are like, "Nah, nah, nah, the teenagers, nah, nah, they slang, no." And I'm like, yeah, they're the teenage. Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I mean, I
What
could.
the fuck
I've not watched the
about?
movie, right? So I can't say. But like, I could maybe see improvising that much of the lines turning out poorly. But as long as it's fun, I don't know. I don't care, right? Or as long as I'm enjoying myself, I don't care. If I don't notice it and I don't, and I'm still having fun, I don't care. That
I
would be my take. But yeah, it
To be
seems a
honest,
silly thing to get upset about, right?
yeah, like as someone who really enjoyed the movie, but then
Mm,
again, it's also like that because keeping up with the Ninja Turtles angle, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles caught me a bit, but it caught me a bit off guard when it started because it was really different in a lot of like at least for the first episode of it, I was like, this is so essentially you turned every character into Michelangelo. Not a problem. Michelangelo is my favorite turtle, but I don't want everyone acting like him. But I tried to stick with it because I did enjoy the art style and everything. And yeah, eventually I kind of warmed up to how different it was. I liked some of the stuff they did. I enjoyed this as another incarnation.
Fair.
To bring back Mutant Mayhem for a bit, there not to spoil you the ending in case you want to see the movie. Maybe we'll talk about it one day. But let's say that the ending is a bit that that still actually going on and off if I like it or not.
Mm,
Because while the movie gets the teenage aspect, the ending may kind of strive against the ninja part without giving away. If you've seen the movie, you know.
yeah, no,
But
fair.
mm, but to be honest, I also know that when it's a franchise that's been around for so long, and again, 40 years is not a number to scoff at, right? Some
Mm.
franchises wish they would still this relevant after 40 years, but it also is so it feels like something you kind of had to do. You have this version in which this happens, but also it's also kind of like,
Well, I mean,
huh?
right? Like, should we bring up Pokemon?
Let's talk about
Because
Pokemon. What do you
Pokemon's a
got?
really old one. I mean, think about it, right? Because Pokemon's another really old one. It's not an adaptation though, but
hmm
I
It's
guess it
like
technically no, it's not an adaptation because like the games are not meant to be the games and the show are meant to be very different things. Just as if you look at the Pokemon manga, that is a
But at the
wild
same
ass thing.
time, but at the same time, though, you say that, but despite that, the gym leaders, at least from in the first season Pokemon, they
Oh,
go
they
as the
always
game.
do. There's always like things
Yeah,
that are
but like
pulled from.
Brock, Misty, and who's the third one?
Oh
I don't
God, why are
remember
you
all their
asking me
names
the old ones? I don't remember.
because this is what I watched of
I'm not a.
Pokemon. Okay, I lost count. It's lasted forever. What do you want from me?
We're not true fans. All the Pokemon fans are gonna be mad at us now. Uh,
Well, I kind of say I'm not a Pokemon fan. I enjoyed the anime when it was going. I played some of the
well,
games, and
no, fair,
I'm
fair.
engaged
It's
to
still
a
going
Pokemon
actually.
fan.
HC. it's it's still
I
going.
know, but Ash's story is done.
Yeah, Ash
That's the thing.
retired. HC. That's wild. Like that's the thing I wanted to
Yeah,
bring up. Like getting into this like this age thing. Like I think your franchise does need to change, and you do need when you're doing these even adaptations, right? If it's old enough, sometimes you do need to change it up to suit more modern audiences sometimes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think personally. If you change it so much up to suit modern times that you lose, I think the idea, right, for an adaptation almost always should be trying to keep the heart the same, right? Like trying to keep those similar ideals or similar feelings and vibes, basically, right?
on that note, I just have to say, speaking of Pokemon adaptations, I don't care what you do with it, but give me more Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu, please.
Sure.
Speaking of that,
Uh huh.
listen. Wild story here, okay?
Oh boy.
I've I've never played the Detective Pikachu game. I know it existed. I've seen the memes, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never knew it existed, but I've seen someone do like a CinemaSins parody of that game, like everything wrong with Detective Pikachu, and there was a point there where if you've seen the movie, if you haven't played the sequel or the game, whatever, spoilers. But so I'm watching the video, right, because I was curious, and then there's the point where I'm like, don't tell me Pikachu is the kid's father. No, like there was a line in the game where I'm like, don't tell me Pikachu is the kid's father. And then because the game doesn't resolve this, then the movie comes out, and guess what? I was fucking right. And people to this day reply to my comment saying, dude, spoilers. And I'm like, I didn't know. I didn't know. But then the funniest part, they announced a Detective Pikachu sequel, a game sequel, a sequel to the game where they say that the resolution is going to be different from the movie.
I mean, which is
The
probably
resolution,
for.
the resolution wasn't different. The Pikachu was still the damn
Oh,
father.
the only thing I watched that movie, and the only thing I remember it is just Mr. Mime. That's the only thing I remember, and the scene with Mr. Mime. Mostly, I think, because of the meme, right? That's the only thing I remember from that film.
I just also like the point in the arena where just because they actually let Ryan Reynolds go Pika, because for
Mhm.
the rest of it it's the original voice actress. So yeah. So speaking of adaptation, if you promise a different ending to the ending I called out before it was even an ending, you should probably change something. Just saying. Uh, well, so yeah, Pokemon. What about it as an adaptation?
Well,
The anime?
I was just bringing it up for reference to like the age of something and changing it up, and I was gonna say like, hey, I think it's fine that Ash retired, right? That we have
Yeah.
retired Ash, and we've brought in the new girl whose name I don't remember.
Oh,
I'm
it's a
I'm
goal. Well,
totally I'm totally a big Pokemon fan.
I didn't even know they replaced him with a girl. I didn't even know
Yeah.
the replacement is out.
What the fuck is her name? Liko. That's her name.
Okay.
Now you know.
I mean, if it's good, go them. I'm sorry, I fell off of Pokemon a bit
I've
because
enjoyed it. Like from what I have seen of it, I've enjoyed it, but I've not watched a ton of it, right? But I think because again, like Ash retired, I gotta give it at least a little bit of a shot because like what's different about it now, right? That's like my childhood. That was literally
but
my childhood back in the
instead
day.
of instead of being the very best, she wants to be the very worst. There
Hmm,
we go.
maybe we don't know yet,
uh,
but no,
it's
it's different, and I think that's okay, right? As long as the and again, like I said, right, I think you have to, at the very least, if you are changing it up, if you are taking something from the past and bringing it to the present, right, essentially, you need to try to keep that heart of it the same, that vibe, that feeling. And if you can do that, I think for the most part your adaptation will be fine, maybe even good if you can adapt it well, right, to modern times.
But
Now,
the question is, what would you say is a line in terms of changing stuff?
hmm,
Like, what is a thing that you should be kept the same no matter what?
uh, well, I mean, I think I just said it right. You have to. I think I say that, but there has been stuff that has changed the original feeling or vibe of something for the better, right? So
Sometimes, yeah, but
that's
like to
really
me,
hard because I would honestly think and say that I don't think there is a line that you can cross in adapting something. I think you can adapt anything and you can change up as much as you
I
want
would
and need to.
say, I would say there are some red flags. Like, for example, let's say you are adapting Spider-Man again, because there are a lot. But let's
I
say
know
you
a
are
red
adapting,
flag.
but no, but let's say
You
you are
make the
adapting
main character
Spider-Man.
look really weird. Cough, cough, Sonic, cough, cough.
Oh, we'll get to Sonic, don't worry. But let's say you're adapting Spider-Man, right? Let's assume
Mhm.
to theater, to Broadway. You bring Spider-Man to Broadway, and suddenly you make it so that Peter Parker is not responsible to Uncle Ben's death.
Are you referencing something, HC?
Yeah, because it fucking happened.
I know it did. I heard of this one.
So yeah, so this is something like that. That's going too far for me. If Peter Parker is not responsible for Uncle Ben's death, that means that there's no
I mean,
the team of responsibility is out the window.
but
That's going too far for me.
didn't the games do that? The recent games.
No.
I mean, Uncle Ben was already dead. Peter wasn't.
Okay, you see, that's different. There's a difference
Okay.
between Uncle Ben already died and we are just starting up.
And
You
spoilers, they
know,
did kill Aunt
after.
May, and he was technically responsible for that.
Well, to be honest, it's not really that he's responsible for that. It's more that he had a choice to make, and she told him, "You know what
Yeah.
the right choice to make is."
Yeah.
By the way, that scene fucking breaks me.
Fair, fair.
That
It's a
scene.
good scene. But yeah,
Yeah,
like, but
but you
that's
see,
another
there's a
diff.
difference between Spider-Man's origin story, you don't need to know it, and Peter didn't even encounter Uncle Ben's killer. It was just a guy, random dude who stole the motorcycle, and Uncle Ben decided, I'm gonna punch him. Oh shit, he has a gun.
I mean, it's what Uncle Ben does. He punches people.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, Peter is not directly involved in this, and if he's
No.
not directly involved in it, then the great power comes great responsibility thing that every Spider-Man thing he's trying to bring to the forefront is kind of gone. So no, this
Well,
is something that's going too far for me.
again, like we have mentioned, right? Because we just talked about it. Excuse me. You can do a Spider-Man without like Uncle Ben dying, right? Either Uncle Ben is just not in the story, but all of the stories that have done that, like the new Marvel Spider-Man and um the new Spider-Man games, right?
Insomniac,
They
yeah.
replaced Ben with May, right? May was that person for Spider-Man, right?
I would say that maybe in the MCU, yes, but I will say in the game it's not really a replacement, and more that it just happens a lot of time after. It's not really a replacement because the impact of Uncle Ben is still felt in the Insomniac universe.
Mhm. But it is still excuse me, it is still trying to be that similar vibe again, right? Like where Aunt May is
I
supposed to like
wouldn't
kind of
I
take.
wouldn't say, because if
You wouldn't
anything,
think
it
so?
shows that Peter. I would say that in that case, it shows that Peter actually learned from
Mm,
that, because
okay,
Uncle Ben died because he didn't care about responsibility. Aunt May died because he took responsibility.
okay, fair enough. Again, like, but that is still an adaptation, right? It's still different, but it is still it's taking the story of that character further, and I think that's another a thing that right an adaptation should be able to do and should be willing to do, right? Is if you are changing up the story in any manner, right, you need to be able to take the character further with the changes you're making.
Yeah,
Like
and
you mentioned
this
Sonic earlier, right? Like if a character feels like they're taking steps backwards to then go to the exact same place they're already at, your adaptation has also in some ways failed. Even if it's a good adaptation, your adaptation is still somewhat failed because we've not seen
yeah,
the character do anything new or we've not seen the character
and
grow.
then and keeping it to the term, keeping it to Sonic, for example, then you get stuff like Sonic Underground. What the fuck was that? That's my question.
uh that was a story from what I understand.
Or it was a story. It was indeed something. And to be fair, it's kind of fascinating to see how much of the point it misses, like completely. Especially when you consider it was supposed to be a promotional piece for Sonic Adventure, which is like, yeah, let's advertise. Let's use Alvin and the Chipmunks to advertise an action adventure game that has nothing to do with it. Sure, woo, let's go with that. But Sonic Underground is just fascinating in how much it goes too far. Like, this is just that was just missing the point. But at the same time, it's also fascinating in how much it missed the point. But anyway, speaking of, because we're talking about superheroes and you were also talking about that, let's talk about a very infamous adaptation. Are
Mm-hmm.
you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the superhero genre, Batman, the Killing Joke.
That one's hard because like that wasn't inherently a bad film, right? It was, from what I remember, fairly good, right? It was
Uh,
just like
have you seen it? That's my question.
it's been a long time. Like I kind of remember it, but it's been a long time. It's been a while.
Well, so here's the thing. People would say that the Killing Joke part is done well in terms of like the voice acting and staying true to the source material and everything. But then you have like the first half of it, which is
Yeah.
which has nothing to do with the Killing Joke.
Yeah, because that was added in, right?
That was at an end because if you just did the comic as is, they can't stretch it to to
Yeah,
half an hour
yeah, half an
to
hour. Yeah,
full
that's what it
length.
was. Yeah,
So like they needed to add something. And what so they decided, let's have a prologue that focuses on Batgirl to give it a bit more development
and they put
before she
Batgirl
gets
and
shot.
Bruce in a relationship in that one.
And not only that, they made Batgirl seem really needy, and it wasn't a good movie for her,
No,
like at all.
it was bad. Yeah, I'm remembering more
And
and more
also,
now as we
and like
talk.
you could tell, you could fucking tell that the person who wrote the Killing Joke part didn't write the prologue. You can fucking tell.
Mm. Yeah, that
You
one.
know, the same graphic novel that would go. I've been thinking about us, about you and me. I've been thinking a lot about you and me, about how this is all going to end, about who is going to kill who. Perhaps you'll kill me, perhaps I'll kill you, perhaps sooner, perhaps later. And then suddenly before this you have a line, and they saying the gays and they're saying the gay scene is complicated. What?
Yeah, I'm remembering now.
So this is a point where I say this is adding too much, and it does end up hurting the product because it doesn't really it adds to the running time of the thing, but it's not good.
Well, it adds to it, right? But it's not. It's adding to it, but it's not taking into account everything else from Batman, right? It's just taking into account the Killing Joke, and it's like, what can we add into the Killing Joke, and
And
that's
even
it.
then, and even with that into the Killing Joke, the prologue is literally has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's also the problem. Like they added and they didn't connect anything, and then on top of not connecting anything, they completely ignored all of the other stuff for Batman, right? Like all of the other stuff for Batman and Batgirl, and they just ruined those characters because they ignored all of that, right? And that's where the problem comes in, and therein lies.
Yep.
And
So to me, this is going too far. Adding stuff for the sake of it, and it's not connecting to what you're trying to adapt. And also, if you are ignoring if you're ignoring some stuff that misses the point of the original piece.
I think you again, I still think because we have had stuff that has ignored and done well, but you have to have a really good understanding of the original media to be able to like even still you have to have that really good understanding of the original media to be able to ignore what the original media did and still adapt it, right? And run with that in through the rest of it. Because even though you're ignoring it, you are still adapting and it is still coming from, like, say you're taking from a book to a show. We have had stuff, very rare, I will admit. These are the exceptions, not the rule.
Yeah.
But they have happened where, oh, this isn't the same. This is all different, but that's okay because I wouldn't say it's better. It is different, but it's good different, right? that has happened, rare as
Yeah.
it may be. I'm blanking on an example to give you. I'm sure someone in the comments can
I'm sure there's probably
give one,
something
but
like, you know,
I'm
book
currently blanking
adaptations
on
to
one. I
shows.
apologize.
I think, like, somebody would probably mention Game of Thrones, but I haven't read the books. No, watch the shows, so I
Game of
can't tell.
Thrones is an interesting one because it started off adapting from the books, right? Like they made their changes, absolutely, and they made their changes to suit what they were the show they were making, which made sense. But then once they ran out of book material, they had more that they had to do, but they had no idea what to do with that. And they just didn't stick the landing because at that point they were adding their own stuff. They were making it up as they went, right? And they just did not stick anything after that point. They weren't able to land it as well.
Yeah.
I would say, is it bad TV? No, not necessarily, but it doesn't compare to what the story they were telling beforehand, and it loses some of its luster and it loses some of the ideas they had for the characters when they started off, right? Like, so it again, it kind of just fell on its face essentially.
Definitely. Well, so the next thing, I guess the next thing to kind of ask is, we're talking about what's going too far and what's a bad thing, but so let me ask you, what kind of change are you more forgiving of?
I got the perfect answer for this one. I'm ready to go for this one. I'm more forgiving of something when it tries to do something new personally, because if you're taking, like, again, the Fallout show, for example, I'm more personally forgiving of that because it's telling something new. It's giving me something completely new within that universe that I already like and enjoy. So I'm way more forgiving of that personally because that's what I like to see. I like to see new stuff. Personally, I'm not a big fan of just taking the same story and retelling it in a different media. I'm fine with that. You can do that, but I do like to see new things, new stuff sometimes. And so if you do that and maybe you don't stick the landing very well, I'm still personally more forgiving of it because I'm enjoying what I'm getting, which is brand new material.
Well, I think what I could be more forgiving of personally is if there's a change that I think doesn't necessarily hurt the original, like it doesn't go against the
Hmm.
message or the moral or anything, or if it's used to amplify something. Like going back to Harry Potter, one of the changes that happened in the Half Blood Prince was that in the book there's supposed to be kind of like a fight after Snape kills Dumbledore.
Mm.
There's supposed to be this fight between the Order of the Phoenix and the Hogwarts teachers against some
Yeah.
Death Eaters, right?
Yeah.
And in the movie, they cut that
Yes.
and kind of kept it focused solely on Harry. And some people said, well, there was supposed to be a big fight. What happened? And the explanation was actually given that when they wrote that movie, Deathly Hallows, the book was already out. So they knew what they were building up towards. And they figured, well, we're going to have this big battle of Hogwarts in the final film. Then why, so if we do this now, we can kind of blow our cards early. So I
That
think this is a perfect. What do
that
you?
not I would just say, like, I think keeping the focus on Harry in that moment is better, right?
Yeah,
Because you
and
get
for
to
the
kind of
record,
feel that pain with him, right?
mhm. And also I think for Half Blood Prince, I'm not that big a fan of the movie
Hmm.
itself. Like it's not bad, but I feel this is one where if I say I prefer the Order of the Phoenix movie to the book because the book is kind of boring and everything. In with Half Blood Prince is kind of the opposite. That I really like the book, but the movie is less to my liking.
Fair enough.
But this is a change that I actually like. That it keeps it focused on Harry at this moment, and also again it is a good point that you don't because suddenly in the final movie Hogwarts, the place where which is supposed to be safe for Harry and supposed to be safe and for everyone, is suddenly under attack by this army and by Voldemort himself. So it makes a bit more sense to save that for the final film, right? Instead of just be the climax of an earlier film and then you're basically blowing your load off a lot earlier than you should.
That's fair. Yeah, I would agree.
So this is a change that I actually don't mind. And if I need to think about another one, going back to Spider-Man again, and whenever people bring up changes when it comes to adapting Spider-Man, I should bring up a lot of people seem to be okay with the organic webs in the Sam Raimi trilogy. This is like something that I don't necessarily mind, but I prefer the mechanical webs because it shows Peter's ingenuity a
Yeah,
lot more.
it's one of those things
Uh,
of it's probably something a lot of people I think don't think about, but if you notice it and think about it, then like it means a bit more to you. But it doesn't hurt anything. But yeah, I would agree. I think it's better one way than the other. But it doesn't inherently hurt anything that it was done that way, right?
there you go. Another thing, keeping up with Spider-Man actually, in the newest game, in the Spider-Man 2 game from
Hmm.
Insomniac, Venom is not Eddie Brock. That's Harry Osborn.
Which is, I would argue, a
I don't
better
mind that because
change.
that's the thing. It's not necessarily that it's better or worse. It's just different,
Well, it
but
works
it
better for
works
the
for
story they're telling, right?
yeah. But that's the thing. That's where for the sake of the story they are going for, it works really damn well
Hmm.
that Harry is Venom
But yeah, like
instead of
it's not necessarily
instead of just
better. Yeah, like you're right. It's not better, but it is different. But it does work better for the story they are telling.
and I think this is just the general thing that people look up in an adaptation because, when Christopher Nolan started doing his Batman trilogy, people were like, how can anyone do better than Tim Burton? That's the thing. Christopher Nolan didn't necessarily do it better, he just did it differently, and it works well.
Many people would probably argue it is better, but yeah, I agree.
But
It's not a thing of
what you see,
better
it's not
or
necessarily
worse.
that
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not really that it's better, but more that the way Christopher Nolan did it hits more right to some people,
Well,
just like how Tim Burton did it would hit more right to other people.
it's one of those things of they're both really good adaptations in very different ways.
Although I still don't like Batman Begins, but I know I'm wrong on this one. I'm aware. I'm aware. I
But
send the
again,
hate on.
a lot of it's going to come down to personal preference, right? But I think at the end of the day, you can look at like, oh, here's this adaptation and this adaptation and this adaptation is better, but X adaptation is better or Y adaptation is better. I think at the end of the day, you have two really good adaptations. Fucking be happy about that shit. Some stuff doesn't even get one
Yeah,
good adaptation.
yep, you're sadly right. Like, we're talking about different versions of Spider-Man and Batman. Fantastic Four fans are like sitting around poking the sand. The poor self.
Or
They,
Fantastic Four.
I hope that the MCU one is gonna be good. Like, my fingers are crossed.
Here's hoping. But we're How to Train Your Dragon fans, right? We've already had a really good adaptation. We're getting the
Yeah.
live action film. That could be
Uh,
really good too, or it could be really, really bad. But at
here's the
least,
thing,
at least we're
though.
not Fantastic Four fans.
Wow. Okay, so this should be the new tag for the people who defend Nine Realms. Like, hey, it's not Fantastic Four situation.
I mean, technically, it's not. I don't. That's a low, low bar, but
Okay, hold on. Audrey Gray Wind. Use this in your next review. Oh boy.
I mean,
So
I
so
mean, hell, even
anyway,
like X Men is also another one of those that is up and down, right? Like sometimes you get a really good film in there, and then sometimes it's just, eh.
yeah, like look at the fact that so you have X-Men Origins Wolverine, piece of shit. Then you
Mhm.
have the Wolverine. I don't know, people seem to kind of be mixed about that one. And then you get Logan.
Everyone loved Logan.
Yeah, and so like,
Which
but you
fair.
see, you went from a movie that nobody fucking likes to the movie that everyone loves with the same character.
They got
You
there
get
in
what I
the end, I guess.
it's like, it's all times the charm, and then thankfully at least and something I was actually going to say, they got Deadpool right the first time, and then X-Men Origins Wolverine just shows up. It's like uh,
Yeah.
but you know what, in his own movie they got Deadpool right the first time.
Yes, which is good. But,
Mhm.
yeah, like some things are hard to adapt. No lie, right? I feel
Mhm.
like X-Men and Fantastic Four shouldn't be that hard to adapt, but some things are hard to adapt. Like
Yeah, there are some stuff that it's like, actually, speaking of, I was mentioning Disney before. I do not envy the poor directors of Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. They will go.
oh fuck yeah,
They were going into a no-win situation with that.
yeah.
How can Disney adapt Hunchback of Notre Dame? And for the record, I fucking love Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame.
The
Okay,
animated version, right?
yeah, I
Got to be clear.
Well, there's no live action one yet.
Yet,
They're probably making one, but not yet. It's
but
not a thing that's
we're
out.
we're being clear for future viewers. Hello from the past, before the Hunchback of Notre Dame live action film was made. It
Wait
was
a minute.
probably better.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's a portal in my room. Hello, I am HC from the future. This remake is gonna suck. Avoid it. Shit, I knew.
This could be the one though. Maybe HC from the future is wrong.
No, HC from the future is not wrong. If anything, he's supposed to be wiser than me.
We hope. Well, no, that's not true. He went and watched the live action version of Hunchback of Notre Dame, so he's
I
not
guess.
wiser.
You know what? No, you know what? It's not even me, because I would never do that. Fuck that.
That's a Disney
Uh,
plant.
Honestly, legit,
Oh Lord.
the only way you're going to make me watch a Disney live action remake again is if you pay me,
I
or if I,
there's
or
like
if or if I'm like a part of a charity stream or something. These are the only two ways.
the only there's like one or two live action films they could do that I would say like I'm I'm morbidly curious, right? But it's like God, I don't want to, but I'm morbidly curious. Like Hunchback of Notre Dame would be one because, as you said, that feels like a no-win situation. But
No,
I can't lie, I'm morbidly curious as to how bad.
but here's the thing. I'm talking about the animated one now.
No, no,
Okay,
fair.
the
Okay,
animated.
fair. Yeah,
When it comes to the animated Disney one, that was a no-win situation for the directors. And for the record, again, I love Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's in my top three favorite Disney movies. Okay, I love that fucking movie. The point,
fair.
though, you're taking one of the most famous tragedies ever, and you're trying to quote unquote kidify it. You know, you are trying to make it kid friendly in the way that also the main characters are going to be kept alive by the end. It's no longer like in the original is a tragedy that talks about the church and how, and the how much how much of it is corrupted and everything,
Hmm.
and then you turn it into an ugly duckling story.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, when you're given this type of task to to transform a tragedy novel into this, they did the best they fucking could.
Yes. Again, it shows a level of understanding of not only the original story, right, but also the medium that they're working within, as well as the way they have to adapt it and the audience that they're adapting it for, also, right? And I think that's the key, right? You have to know when it comes to adapting anything, like we've talked about it a little bit here or there, when it comes to adapting anything, who are you adapting it for? How are you adapting it? What is the story you're adapting? How familiar are you with it? If you, I feel, cannot answer one of those questions and you don't have ways to answer one of those questions, that adaptation is probably not going to succeed as well. Now, granted, you can probably sit back and say some of those questions are more important than the others, and you would be right. And you can probably fail at one of them more so than the other, and your story still be fine. But I would argue that you need to be able to answer all those questions, and you need to be able to explain your answers to all those questions in a way that feels satisfying. And if you can't do that, I think your adaptation is probably going to fail.
Yeah. You know something? Let's go back to a case that I think have you heard of? You probably know who Kevin Smith is.
Yeah.
Did you hear the time he was supposed to write a Superman movie?
Hmm. Mm.
Superman Lives. Nicolas Cage was set to play Superman. Tim Burton was
I
supposed to direct.
I have heard of it, and I'm also thinking like Kevin Smith as a director for that would be
Writer,
interesting. Or writer for
writer.
that, even writer for that would be interesting.
Because here's the thing: Kevin Smith is a big comic book fan and a big Superman fan.
Yeah.
The
And
thing
for those who
is,
don't know, Kevin Smith is like Jay and Silent Bob. That's one like or Clerks, or some of those things like he's
yeah.
really well known for.
Mhm. But the thing is, when he got the job, he had to work for a producer named John Peters, and he was basically supposed to write an adaptation of the Death and Return of Superman, which is one of the most famous Superman stories ever. And but then and, and you know basically this is something that kind of writes itself. If you love Superman and you love the story, then you know exactly what to do with it, right?
Hmm.
But then he had the producer who told them, okay, here are the three things you need to take into account. Superman can't fly, Superman doesn't wear his usual suit, and Superman has to fight a giant spider by the end.
What?
Exactly.
What? So he was told he has to write what? So
Yeah.
someone definitely didn't know Superman on the production team.
Yeah, but you see, but like, so people said that they read the script, because it's probably online somewhere, and like they said, it's not the best Superman story, but it shows a lot of love, and it's like I'm sure the love came from Kevin Smith and not
Yeah.
John Peters as ludicrous suggested of Superman can't fly.
Weird.
And then he also said that there is a scene where Brainiac is looking for Superman in the North Pole, so he fights some polar bears in it.
Okay. This definitely feels like a little bit more
This I'm
Tim
not motivated enough
Burton-esque
for the record.
Superman.
Huh?
This feels a little bit more like a Tim Burton-esque Superman, right? A little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, it's
But
Tim Burton was supposed to direct, so
oh, no wonder. But it feels like knockoff Tim Burton, right? Like not
because
good Tim Burton.
here's the thing that's interesting though, because Tim Burton signed to direct based on that draft, and then after he got aboard, he basically asked his writer friend to rewrite it.
Mm,
So before they canceled the thing, of course.
hmm,
But
yeah.
yeah, but you see, this is something like that. When you say I'm going to make a Superman movie, and then I say, "Cool, what you got?" And then the producer would go, "He doesn't fly in that one." I'm like, "Okay, you lost me."
Yeah, it's like Superman doesn't fly. Weird. You do
Yeah,
get what Superman does, right?
yeah. It's like so. This is something that no, but at the same time, even though I don't really like that movie, I don't mind the darker take on Superman, like Man of Steel tried to do.
Mhm.
That wasn't the movie's problem. The problem with the movie was the script was outright ridiculous. But that's no here no there,
And
I
you
suppose.
can probably do ridiculous with Superman,
You
but
could no,
I
but
would
it's the thing.
argue,
Here's the thing. It's not trying to be ridiculous though. It's trying to be
yeah.
taken seriously, like it says something big and important, and but it's not. It's nonsense.
Well, yeah, it's also a thing of, I would argue, being kind of ridiculous and over the top works for Batman in some ways, because Batman is kind of that darker, grittier, edgier story somewhat. And so you can be a little bit more over the top with some things to lighten it, right? Superman is already pretty. Superman isn't really dark. Superman is very much the epitome of, like, he's the Boy Scout, right? Like, you can't make that into something that is over the top or zany, because it doesn't work as well, in my opinion, right?
It's
It's You can
more.
easily make Superman go dark, like, looking at the Injustice stuff, right? But making Superman over the top and zany is a lot harder, I would feel.
I guess it depends, but like to me though, so so again in terms of what I'm forgiving of, I don't really mind trying to make Superman a lot more
No, fair. Like,
serious, but
it's definitely something I would
I
be
think,
interested in seeing.
but the thing is, I haven't seen it done well yet. Like
Yeah.
some stuff does go a bit like again the Death of Superman. That's a good comic,
Mhm.
from what I know anyway. I haven't read it for myself, but but and then sometimes in the DC animated universe, they got a bit darker. They got a bit more intense.
Well,
That
there's
was
been,
good.
like, the Injustice stuff, right, for Superman, where he, like,
Yeah, Injustice doesn't have a good story, if you
fair enough.
ask me.
I don't know enough, so fair enough.
Like, again, for the record, the game itself is fun. Before anyone comes to my door, but the story, eh, eh.
Well, I mean, there's also, I don't know if it's called Injustice, but, like, and maybe it is just the Injustice storyline, but there is the stuff where it's like Superman, like, turning, like, basically ruler of Earth sort of deal, going evil because Lois gets killed or stuff like
Uh,
that, right? That
that's
is the Injustice
basically
story, right?
that's Injustice. Though
Okay.
there is the Suicide Squad game where you kill the Justice League
There's that
apparently,
too,
and
yeah.
I know he's evil in that, but I don't want to give this game any more attention.
Fair. I don't think you have to worry. I think that game is being shut down already, right?
No, like it bombed apparently, it lost
Mm-hmm.
money, and I'm like, yeah, you deserve it. You, I guess, no
No
insult to
one
anyone who
saw
worked
no
on the
one
game.
saw that coming.
Mm. Well, anyway, so I guess kind of the final question for the day: would you prefer adding to an adaptation or cutting out of it?
Ooh, I think that one's hard. I think I would like both. It depends on what you're doing, right? If you're creating something new, then I prefer adding. If you're taking what's there and just straight adapting it to a different media, then I think I would prefer you cutting what you don't need to have, right? Cutting it so you can make a more concise and clear story that works for the media that you're using, right? So it's
Yeah.
really dependent. I
So you
think,
see, to me personally, I
yeah.
also think it depends on what you're actually trying to do
Mhm.
with this, like, because if let's say you are adapting something into a game, obviously you'll need to have a bit more there because games are supposed to be long. Like, you have all of those you know, mm, and for the record, a lot of them are bad, yeah, but you have a lot of movies which are adapted to games. You can just have a game that lasts 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
You need something to keep the players there for a bit longer.
Yeah.
So there, obviously, stuff needs to be added. But if the source material is really long and you don't really want to split it, then some corners have to be cut.
Yes. I mean, you could do the One Piece method of, no, no, no. We slow down and we add.
Yeah, yeah, I guess you can do that.
Or,
But
you could
then
do the One
again,
Piece method of, we slow down and we make this one fight last for hundreds of episodes by making
well,
everything overly exaggerated.
that's the thing, though. Would you say that I guess to by any technical degree it is, but would you say an anime adaptation of a manga is like part of this conversation because most of them are fairly loyal?
I Some of them aren't. A lot of them actually aren't. And this is where you kind of get the manga bros who come in. It's like it's better in the manga, and there's a big discussion of that happens within the anime community. A lot of,
Yeah,
is the
like
anime better? Is the manga better?
correct me
Yada
if I'm
yada.
wrong, but isn't like Naruto a bit different because the manga and the anime were kind of being produced at the same time?
Well, I don't think so. I I don't remember exactly. I don't think the manga was done, but I think it was very far along. But the Naruto, like the anime, caught up, and so you had like pretty much an entire year's worth of content for the anime that was completely created for the anime, right? That they just made stuff up, did whatever they did, whatever they wanted to do for the story, right? And like it's basically a huge section of episodes for the first Naruto show that's considered that's quite literally non-canon, that that's filler,
Yes.
literally filler. It's a lot of episodes. It's a huge chunk, and then you get back to, after that huge chunk, it's like, I want to say less than 20 episodes and the show's over. It's like I want to say it's like 50 or 60, maybe more episodes of filler. Then you get to the last like 10 or 20, and that's the ending of the story. We're back to the original story. That's the end. And it's like, when you sit back and think of it like that, it's like, wow,
It
that
sounds like a huh.
it sounds bad, and some of it wasn't great, and I fully don't blame people if they want to skip that large chunk because there's not anything there that's super important or that's great, but there is some stuff that in there that's really good, that is really enjoyable, but it's like it's however you're going to feel about it, right? Looking at One Piece as an example, right? That is, the manga is ongoing. The manga releases weekly, and One Piece has to basically slow its pace so much as to not catch up. Otherwise, One Piece can't air weekly, which is what it does. Like the anime airs one episode every week, and the manga airs more or less like one chapter or so every week, just about. Sometimes they skip, but here or there, but it just depends. But yeah, that one's an interesting one because One Piece doesn't have a lot of filler episodes. It does have filler, but not a lot. And, you could argue that One Piece's filler is in how much they slow down the pacing, right? And how much they make things like, oh, we need to feel time. Everything you're seeing in One Piece, for the most part, happened in the manga, but we're just making it take longer, right? It's one of the only shows that I think I've ever seen do this and has gotten away with it and is still as popular as it is, because One Piece has been going for this at this point over 20 years,
So
which
it's
is wild.
yeah, it is wild, definitely.
And I still love it to death. Like, I'm biased in this conversation 100%, but I'm also happy that we're getting a new anime for One Piece that can sit back and say, hey, we can tell this story at a much quicker pace, right? We can take this story and tell it at a much quicker pace and do more with it and do it quicker and potentially even better than what the original anime could do. I'm happy for that. I'm excited for that because I think it'll be an interesting way to watch this show.
Definitely.
But yeah, One Piece is an interesting one, I feel, in terms of just how it airs and the way it airs. I don't
Well,
think there's many other shows like it, I'll say that.
so to me, I guess like the only thing I can really say for that last point is it depends on what you're trying to do with the adaptation, like,
Yes.
and what type of adaptation is this. So it's a bit of an open question that I all I have to say is depends on what you're doing.
Yes.
Uh, so anything else you have to say on the topic of adaptations?
Adaptations are hard, but I do enjoy them for the most part.
Yeah.
I love especially if you're doing new stuff. I love seeing what people can create in a world that already exists. That's new.
I would definitely agree. Can you wrap this up? I need to take care of everything. Hold on.
Sure, ladies and gentlemen, that has been all for us here at the Outcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. Please let us know what you think in the comments below. If you want to get in touch with us at other places, you can find us at our Tumblr, which is Berkcast Team, or on Twitter, which is Berkcast with a capital B, capital C. With that said, I was your co-host for this episode, Wolf, and I was joined by
HC who got a wrong call, so apologies for that.
I did the outro well this time, so it's all right.
Mm,
With
Yeah,
that
so
said,
just to really do it, that's all for this episode of the Outcast. We hope you enjoyed it. What do you think about the topic of adaptations? You can tell us all about it in the
boo,
comment section below on our Twitter, which is Berkcast with a capital B, capital C, and on our Tumblr, which is
Wolf
Berkcast
did
Team.
it better. Boo.
This is why I did it really quick because we already did that. So
With that said, take care, ladies and gentlemen.
see ya and take care.
Bye bye.